he loves rock and roll. Listen. The idea that certain rhythm patterns or sequences serve as conduits for spiritual energies, linking individual consciousness with the gods, is basic to traditional African religions and African-derived religions throughout the Americas. And whether we're speaking historically or musicologically, the fundamental riffs, licks, bass figures, and drum rhythms that make rock and roll can ultimately be traced back to African music of a primarily spiritual or ritual nature. In a sense, rock and roll is a kind of voodoo. Nobody caught that. Where was he wrong? In a sense. It's not in a sense. Rock and roll is. It is voodoo. You know what's interesting? If you were to turn on, let's say you had a television here and a television here, and you were to mute both TVs and put on a voodoo ceremony on one hand and then a rock concert on the other hand and look at the people, guess what you would see? The same thing. You take it to a hip-hop club and you turn the music down and just mute everything and you look at the screen, guess what you would see? The same identical thing. It's just mutated, adapted to survive in its current atmosphere. Now, I want you to listen to what Ellen White says. Remember, here's what Robert Palmer said. The idea that certain rhythm patterns or sequences serve as conduits for spiritual energies, linking individual human consciousness with the gods. Now, listen to what Ellen White says. For thousands of years, Satan has been experimenting upon the properties of the human mind, and he has learned to know it well. By his subtle workings in these last days, he is linking the human mind with his own. Did you just catch that? Ellen White wrote this years before Robert Palmer comes on the scene. Satan is linking the human mind with his own, and now Robert Palmer says the idea that certain rhythm patterns or sequences serve as conduits for spiritual energies, linking individual human consciousness with the gods. We're talking about possession. We're talking about a manipulation of the environment, and one that destroys or pulls a person not to Jesus, but from Jesus. That's why it becomes extremely difficult to really serve Jesus when you're listening to that kind of music. That's why it becomes difficult to pray like how you want to pray when you're listening to that kind of music. You go down to pray, and what do you hear? The music. I like to call it sonic warfare. You hear this stuff in your mind, and it becomes totally difficult. Now for the chart. So, here we have the abyss, right? And in the 1700s, Lucifer begins to send out these seemingly random streams of sorcery. They just seem like, okay, hey, humanism is over here, romanticism is over there, and it seems like he's just sending out chaotic, just confusion. And these things don't seem to have anything to do with one another. Well, let me take you back to the 60s for a moment. What happened in the 60s? Well, you had the coming together of all these principles in the form of one movement. Who was that movement? What was that movement? It was the hippie movement. Anybody with me? Yes. Okay. What did the hippies do? What were the hippies all about? Well, eroticism. Is that what I heard? Oh yeah, that's right. Hey, isn't that? They were Romanticists, remember we talked about them being the what? Being the hippies of the day. They were the romantics. They were the poets. Come on, you remember this, right? You remember the hippie? I know you weren't there during that time, but you've seen the stuff you've read about it, right? They were romantics. They believed in Mother God. You know, they worshipped the earth. Many of them were evolutionists. They believed in humanism. Who are you to say that this is wrong? They embodied all these principles, including the voodoo music. Everything was captured. It was almost as though Satan was performing an experiment. What would happen if I brought the same things that led to the French Revolution and combined them into one movement in America? And what do you have happening in the 60s? One word summarizes the 60s. Begins with an R. Rebellion. Isn't that something else? Ellen White said, the same things that sprung out of the French Revolution are the same things that our young people are dealing with today. And we see it at least coming up to the 60s, embodied in one single movement. Well, guess what happens? The hippie movement dies out, sort of. Because when the hippies got tired of, all their stuff, when they got disillusioned, when they saw that they were spinning wheels, guess what? Many of them said, well, it's time to try Jesus. Oh boy. Oh boy. So here we have this dividing line. They're once in the world, these hippies, and now they say we're going to convert and we're going to come into the church. Are you seeing this chart? Is the chart beginning to make some sense? And so what you have is this mass exodus of these hippies from the world, and now they come into the church. Here they are. It's a good thing that they've come into the church. Jesus wants people to come into the church. But there was a problem. Woo! There was a problem. And there is a problem. Is anybody seeing the problem? I haven't said anything yet. You're just looking at that chart, and hopefully you now totally understand what this chart means. Because when the hippies came into the church, they brought some things with them. They brought some philosophies. They brought some ways of thinking. They brought some packages, almost like a Trojan horse. Let's talk about some of the things that they brought into the church. Number one, they brought in their evolutionary thinking. Their evolutionary thinking. Remember, evolution teaches that in order to survive, you must adapt. So the hippies come into the church, they say, hey, we want to spread the gospel. We want to see people coming into the church, but we've got a problem. We're too different. The church is too different from the way that the world appears. And so in order for Christianity to survive, we must adapt. We must look like they look, and we must talk like they talk, and we must walk like they walk. So when they came in, they kept their hippie appearances. And now Jesus was cool, dude. So in order for them to say, hey, look, don't throw me totally out there as some Christian, crazy guy. Now, look, I'm still one of you. Look, we're just adapting in order to fit and survive, because if Christianity doesn't survive, then what will happen 30 years from now? We've got to survive, and guess what? The church bought the philosophy.